It profits the movement nothing if MAGA scores a political victory, but then a member goes home that night and masturbates to porn or heads to a bar and takes part again in the hookup culture, whatever it is he's doing. We can't scream through the bullhorns and post online, "Christ is King," and then refuse to do what the King commands. There's not a single person walking the earth who isn't screwed up somehow, and that includes everyone in MAGA. A person's psyche, that interplay between their emotions and their intellect, is ultimately what brings about their final vote when it comes to politics. And that's true of not just politicians, but voters as well. In the end, you can choose only one, kind of like heaven or hell. Choosing mostly right might not be good enough when it comes to standing before Christ, the judge and king. So let's look at this a little bit more closely. We are this inexplicable mix of emotions and intellect, heart and mind, if you will, and each affects the other. Depending on how successfully a person's navigated his younger years will have a major impact on how he views the world and interacts with it. For example, contrast a young boy who has a minimal amount of struggle in childhood, emotional struggle, meaning nothing particularly out of the ordinary. We all have something. Compare him now with the boy who is beset by physical and psychological sexual abuse throughout his childhood. It would be insane to think that each of those boys emerging from their own respective childhoods would have the same self-view. Their political insights, their political views might be the same or very similar. The abused boy might even have a higher IQ and thus be able to perform better at assorted jobs or professions. But at the end of the day, one is damaged minimally because we're all damaged. The other is damaged greatly. And moreover, neither has a starting capacity to meaningfully relate to the other. One has a terrible dark secret and all the accompanying shame from it. The other could not begin to emotionally fathom the intensity of hurt and shame that the other carries around. And so we begin to see how, with our little small example here, how a spectrum of emotional health develops, a continuum where people stand in relation to one another. And this has nothing to do with how successful professionally or financially one might be. Emotional pain and the self-view that pain engenders makes no distinction between bank accounts. As you travel more left across this continuum, this spectrum, you encounter the truly hurting crowd whose internal pain is too frightening for them to face. So with deep hurt coupled with next to nothing in the area of good moral grounding, intellectually, they appear nuts. Purple hair, intense anger, simmering just below the surface, and so forth. They're dangerous because they see the world through such a distorted view of themselves that violence and mayhem are perfectly fine. But what about as you move the opposite direction down the spectrum? Who do you encounter then? It likely may be the more respectable crowd who have some measure of social standing, but are by no means exempt from impaired self-understanding. It's just that the circumstances they were born into or happened into because of their good looks, or their physical prowess, or their personalities, or whatever, help set them up to appear stable emotionally. Compared to the other end of the spectrum, they may many times be more stable, actually, relatively speaking. But that's sort of grading them on a curve. But life doesn't really grade on a curve. Life doesn't care if you were raped as a boy, had psychologically abusive parents, were beat up or mocked by your peers in school. And that's because there will always be some guys farther down or up that spectrum for where you were. One guy will be unable to plug into your self-view because it's not his experience. The other guy will have had it far worse than you, and he will look on your experiences as better than his. All that said, there's a danger for MAGA types, and it's this. The comparison of us to the lefties makes it appear that we are better. We have a firmer grasp on reality, common sense, all of that. Certainly on one level that's true, but only by comparison. There are many people in the MAGA world who are also extremely emotionally damaged, but for a variety of reasons beyond them, they didn't really cause them to happen, for example, they have for the moment managed to escape the consequences, for the moment, of their own resulting vices. Catholic rad trads, Protestant Bible thumpers, trickle-down financiers, and many more. They're all somehow immune, do you think, from pornography, lust, alcoholism, adultery, envy, gambling addictions, divorce, insufficient parenting? Every single one of those always arises from a wrong self-perception, which then always goes back to bad emotional health. No one is immune. Some just have it worse than others. They might be able to present an outward show of not being vulnerable to any of that, even engaging in one or more of them. But what's inside a man oftentimes is masked over by worldly achievement. It profits the movement nothing if MAGA scores a political victory, but then a member goes home that night and masturbates to porn or heads to a bar and takes part again in the hookup culture, whatever it is he's doing. We can't scream through the bullhorns and post online, "Christ is King," and then refuse to do what the King commands. The same King will judge each of us of how we conformed to him, not how much better we might have been in comparison to people who got dealt a totally crappy hand from the beginning. And for those who did get dealt a better hand in life from the beginning, Jesus' words should instill at least a little bit of fear. To whom much has been given, much will be demanded. For the counter-revolution to achieve its intended result of making America great, well, we don't need to just fight the left. We do need to do that, but we must also fight the interior. It's always been and always will be a two-front war. Coming to you from Houston, Texas, I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.